afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be. Advanced IT's tuning in from Chicago. So I think he's on your time, maybe, Andrea. So I
Yep,
got
that's
4:03
correct.
here on the East Coast. So Andrea's like straight up coffee time at 3 o'clock. So
Definitely.
I guzzled mine down before we got started today. So I had a 3 o'clock that I had to get on. So I had my coffee beforehand. So I'm ready to go. I feel like we were just doing this like not even 24 hours ago. So
Yep.
but yes, the A team is back on the air today for a Thursday. Work week is almost done. Where is it cold where you're at in Chicago, Advanced IT? Because it's like 63 here, and we were just talking. I'm not ready for the cold weather yet. How about you, Andrea?
No, I love the fall, but I'm just not quite ready this year. I'm not ready to be cold.
Same. I was like, I didn't want to put on long sleeves today, but I had to because it's chilly. So, but we've got a hot topic today. I think we've got a topic around sales today. And I think that this is one of those topics that is a tough one for MSPs because we're not by nature salespeople. So that's always that challenge. But we're going to be interviewing Brian Gillette here in a second. But if you have questions that you want to ask Brian or any of us, or Andrea and I, post the letter Q colon in the comments, type your questions so I can find those in the chat. But we'll be taking questions throughout. Hopefully, we won't interrupt Brian's flow because he has a lot of things to share with us today.
Mhm.
So, Advanced IT said it's 73. See, I can take that. When it gets into the
That's
50s and
perfect.
60s, I'm like,
Yeah,
not quite ready for that. So, but thank you, those of you who are tuning in live. We appreciate it. Those of you who are going to watch this on the replay, which we know is the vast majority of our audience, we thank you for being here. We're excited to cover this very a topic that I really think we need to get our arms around as MSPs, and either get good at that as ourselves, and Brian's going to help us with that if we're an MSP owner that maybe we're the salesperson, but maybe we're to the point where we might need to hand off that sales role to someone else. That's the stuff we're going to dive into today. So Sheila said she's in Seattle. It is cloudy and 53 degrees where she is at. So I'm right with you. I'm not ready for that, but Sheila, thank you so much for tuning in. So let's get right into our interview. So this is the first time I missed ScaleCon last week, and I know Brian spoke at ScaleCon, so a lot of you got to maybe meet Brian. So if you've met Brian, put that in the comments. I'm curious to see what you thought of his session. I'm bummed that I missed it because this is always one of those topics that I love. So without further ado, please help us welcome Brian Gillette to the stage today. So we'll give you the
Yes,
fanfare
yes.
music. So,
Wow.
so we know how to bring
Please,
it,
please.
man. So we're gonna be throwing some
Amazing.
curveballs down the middle today. But yeah, this is a topic, like I said, that a lot of MSP shy away from. But we have to have sales to make everything work, and I think that's really something we need to get our arms around. So Andrea is going to kick off
absolutely.
our questions. So again, if you have questions for Brian throughout today's show, please put those in the comments. We want to make sure that those of you who tuned in live and have a burning sales question for Brian or any of us, that we make sure that we answer that while you're here live with us. So we definitely appreciate that. So we're going to let Andrea
Well,
take it off today.
and as Andrew mentioned, Brian was with us last week at ScaleCon. He talked a bit about building your sales process. But for those that didn't have the opportunity to meet you and see you last week, Brian, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're qualified to talk to us today about this topic?
Yes, I'd love to. So I was a VP of sales for an MSP in Southern California where I live. Did that for 3 years. Left that company in August of 2020, and my 2020 quota was 2,500 net new MRR per month. Net new. So if we lost business that month, I had to oversell to hit my number. And yeah, I had at one point, we built up a big team, had a bunch of salespeople on my team sort of working alongside me. And we built that business up from about 500,000, just under 500,000 to 2 million in annual revenue in 3 years. And since then, I've been running my company Feel-Good MSP, where I've been coaching other MSPs to have those same results and build process, hire people, stuff like that. So I've been now in the channel for about 6 years, helping MSPs and do their thing.
Amazing. So you definitely know your stuff. So a lot of our guys, they are nimble MSPs, and they're doing sales on their own. They're kind of have taken the reins to do this. So my first question for you would be, when would they know is the right time to actually go and start to hire a salesperson?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think a big piece, and especially if you're an MSP that's watching, I would love chime in on this. Tell me if you're identifying as one of these scenarios, because oftentimes we have the owner who's selling, and they're selling because it's a necessary evil to them. Like they're doing it because they absolutely have to. If that's the case, then you should hire literally the day you can afford it. Like you should not delay. Don't try to keep your hands on this thing. You should outsource this to a team member as fast as you possibly can. But I mentioned as soon as you can afford it. What you don't want to do is hire prematurely. And the evidence of hiring prematurely is that you have a ticking clock, that you're handing a time bomb to an employee on their first day, saying, if you don't close this much money in 90 days, this bomb will go off. If you have that finite of a time limit, or you have that like fixed of a cash runway, you're not really ready, and you're going to be putting an unsustainable amount of pressure on yourself, on that person, on your system, on your marketing investments. And nobody is their best self when they're afraid. You're not setting that person up to succeed. You're actually setting that person up to be your scapegoat, and you get to blame them when you don't hit your numbers. But it's very unlikely that you can put somebody in that much pressure early on with very little support and see them actually push through it. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you've got a plan for what happens if that person takes longer than you want. And you have to have your stops in place for like, how long can we go before we know that we've given this person enough time to succeed? And then take the plunge. And I think that's probably the best answer I can give. But I'm curious if anybody is finding themselves like, man, I want to hire, but I've got to get my money back in 60 days, or I only have $10,000. Is that enough? Or if you have any of those constraints, then I'd love to dig into any specifics if it would be helpful.
Well, I'd be curious to know too, Andrew, when you owned your MSP, did you hire salespeople? Did you do sales yourself? Like, kind of what was your experience?
I enjoyed the sales part myself, because I think there's two ranges for IT people. Like I like the tech, but I don't love the tech. Like I don't mind getting in, figuring out how things work, but I don't find myself like losing myself in the tech. So I enjoyed the sales, the relationship building. So, throughout, running my MSP, I was the primary salesperson. So for me, I had to get better at that as a skill, and I hired out the technical roles. But I think for the vast majority of the folks that are in the tech tribe, I think the opposite is true. They're techs. They love it. They get to lose themselves for hours in technical solutions and coming up with things. And they're, really shy away from the sales part. You probably find the same thing too, Brian, as you talk to people.
Oh yeah. And I kind of have some tough love to give a lot of people in this particular conversation, where they're like, look, I'm a technician at heart. That's what I want to do. I don't want to, I just had a meeting with somebody this week who was like, I don't want to do any of this. I don't want to build the sales program. I don't want to write any of this stuff. So I said, okay, you're telling me you want a completely done for you, 100% outsourced sales and marketing department where somebody builds your brand, sells deals for you, and hands you signed contracts. He was like, yes, exactly. And I said, okay, I think that's the end of our meeting. Like, this is a huge red flag. What you want is a job where you can do anything you want. And then you have a system built around you where other people will build a business for you and then you keep all the equity. There is a business term for this. It's called, and this is going to sound like a joke, but there is a business term for this. It's called magical thinking, right? It is where we lean towards saying, because I want something and believe it could happen, therefore that's the result I'm going to get. And that's exactly what it is. It's magical thinking. Yeah, you need to take a vested interest in the success and the overall infrastructure of your sales department, or your full-time job needs to be supporting the people who sell your product and service for you, because they are the ones ultimately building your dream, your retirement, your exit for you. So you can't just only be a technician, a mad scientist in a lab, and then people come in and bring you magical problems that you get to fix, and that's your whole job. That doesn't exist if you want to run a business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think at that point, like if that's, my recommendation is having, you would almost need a partner that liked that part of it, rather than abdicating that, bringing in, trying to train somebody green to take over. And that's not, a bad thing, but I think if that's what you want to do as an MSP owner, that you need to, give that role to somebody who's qualified. I think bringing in a salesperson and expecting them to build a sales process, expecting them to do marketing and get the marketing going to bring in the leads, that's the big thing that I see a lot of MSPs where they fail, to quote unquote fail at sales, is that's kind of the process that they go through.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, there's different echelons of salesperson too, right? Like we're saying sales hire, but a cold caller is a salesperson. An account executive is a salesperson. An account manager is a salesperson. A head of business development, a CRO, if you will, is a salesperson. But if you want somebody who's going to create infrastructure from the ground up, white paper, turn absolute blank space into that is a business development partner. If you came to me and said, hey, would you build all of this for me and join my team? I'd say, yeah, give me 49 points, right? Because that's what you're asking. You're asking me to make this thing work, right? But if you have a system or a consultant or training or whatever, if you're willing to go through the work of digging those trenches and pouring that foundation, and then you bring in a person whom you've created a system for, then that person can be successful. But if you know what I mean? Like you kind of have to pick one or the other. Like you either need to support that person all the way, or you need to compensate the person who needs absolutely zero support accordingly. And this is where MSPs get stuck, is they feel entitled. Frankly, they feel entitled to the best of both of those worlds. And that doesn't exist. That is magical thinking.
Right. So to piggyback on what you're saying now, you mentioned something earlier about setting up this person for success. So it sounds like before you even hire them, you need to put in place some pieces that will do just that. So what are those kind of building blocks and steps you need to put in place before you even think about hiring this person?
Yes, 100%. So glad you asked. So number one, first things first, is you have to have process. In the same way that you can't just put a smart person who's likable, who fits your culture, you can't just put them in your bullpen with a laptop and say, manage my customers now, help my customers with their help desk issues. That doesn't exist. They would say, what are you talking about? How do I do that? I need tools. Who am I supposed to talk to? What am I supposed to say? How do I access their machines? How do I know the best practices for how I'm supposed to solve each of these things, right? In your support department, you've got SOPs, you've got tools in place, you have infrastructure, you have hierarchy in place, you have policies in place. You have to have the same amount of detail that you sunk into that operations department. You have to build the exact same thing on the mirrored side for your sales. But the first thing is process. What do they say when they get somebody on the phone? And furthermore, how do they get somebody on the phone? Like, what phone number do they use? Where do they find the kind of person that they should call? Where do they get their phone number? What types of people should they be calling? Your job is to have answers, articulate answers to all those questions. Then once they get on the phone, what do I say? What am I trying to get them to do? How do I explain why we're valuable? All of that is your job. You run the business. You're responsible for coming up with that infrastructure, or at least investing in partners who can help you develop it if that's outside of your skill set, right? But you can't just hand a likable, good-looking person a phone and say, go find me money. That doesn't work, right? You've got to build of course, you have to build process around them. After the process, you have to have tools. So if you have a salesperson, you need a CRM, period. Which means if you want to hire a salesperson, you need to buy a CRM first. Then you need to configure your CRM. It's not as hard as a PSA, but you have to do that. You have to build a deal flow. You have to build a pipeline. You have to set up your task types. You have to integrate it with your email or whatever you're going to do. Set up your soft phone. Build the tools that they will use in their day-to-day. And then you have to have procedures and policies underneath all of that process and tools so that they know how to best leverage those tools. And finally, you need to have expectations, super clear-cut day-to-day expectations. I met with an MSP, bless him, and he was like, my sales guy's not performing. And I said, what do you mean by not performing? He's like, well, I don't really know if he's doing a good job or not. I said, and I was like, elaborate, what does that mean? He said, well, I don't know if he's on track. I'm like, well, is he hitting his activity numbers? He's like, well, he doesn't have activity metrics. So he just hired a guy and was like, okay, sell now. But the guy has no clue what that means. The owner has no clue what that means. Or they both have conflicting definitions of what that means. So it's impossible for that to succeed. Impossible, right? We have to say, okay, welcome to our company. This is our value proposition. These are our 3 core uniques. This is the product that we sell. This is how our price compares to our competitors. These are the industries that we service. Here's a list of 5,000 names and phone numbers. They might be all accurate. They might not be all accurate. This is what you say when you get them on the phone. And I need you to make 75 phone calls a day. And then every month, we're going to look back and look at your talk time, see how many conversations we're having, because our goal is to get you to 1 client every 6 to 8 weeks. All of that is required for a salesperson to succeed. And when you've done all of that, it becomes a lot more, it's almost inevitable that you will have a successful sales hire. But if you're hearing me talk right now and going, whoa, that's not my job. That's the salesperson's job. I'm here to tell you, I need to take you to the chiropractor for a second and give you an adjustment. That is exactly what your job is. And it is not a salesperson's job to build your sales process. It's your sales, just like it's not your technician's job to write every SOP in your operations bank. It's to follow the SOPs, tell you when they work or don't work, make suggestions along the way, and execute the job to the best of their ability. That's the same with a salesperson.
So I think you touched on one of the things there too, is kind of the expectations. So just give the instance that you were just talking about. So the business owner says, they're not working out, the salesperson's not working out. So in that instance, did you see that was it really a personnel problem, or was that a business issue for that particular MSP?
It's almost, in the one I just explained, there's no way we could ever gauge that personnel. We have no foundation from which to assess them. So we have to assume it's definitely a business issue. There could be a personnel issue on top of that, right? Like it could be the wrong seat. But they never had a chance to be successful because there was no definition of success. So we have the owner then, being the one who's in charge, the one who gets all the money at the end of the day, has to take the first action there and go, okay, I'm going to do everything I can to define a realistic term for success. We agree on what a successful version of this job is on front-end activity and results. We agree on it. Then I give you all the tools and the encouragement and the culture and the support to execute the lead activity to see what happens on the back end. But I feel like it's almost always a business issue, because you really you don't have to have a magical candidate for them to be successful. Like I turned technicians into very successful cold callers with 0 sales experience. I've never trained a cold caller who didn't quit, who couldn't book an on-site meeting within 30 days. Never. And I've trained, personally, I probably trained a dozen, maybe 12 to 20 salespeople. If you're making 100 dials a day, cold outbound calls, they've always been able to generate a real meeting within 30 days. Did the meeting always close? Maybe, maybe not. That's not their job. Their job is to find opportunities. You know what I mean? So you can make almost anybody successful if you give them the tools and the process to be successful, and they're willing to then do the job.
So if I'm an MSP right now, like I know right now I'm doing the sales, I'm selling, and then obviously we have the conundrum. I also have to do the project once I do sell. What would you recommend they start with as far as laying that foundation for that sales process? Like what
Yeah.
would be an easy steps that somebody could take like within the next 30 days to start that process of wanting to hire somebody? What are the things you talked about CRM? Fortunately for them,
Yeah.
if you're watching this and you're a Tech Tribe member, like the CRM's part of your membership, so that excuse is out the window.
Yeah.
But what would they have to do like in the next 30 days if somebody wanted to get out of that salesperson role? What things would you have them do in the next month?
Yeah, great question. For starters, like vision gives pain a purpose. Make a super clear goal of what you're trying to achieve. So what I like to do is think of this as like phase one is making a bright line for how much MRR or how many seats do I have to sell before I can hire a sales guy. Do all your math, look at your numbers. It's one more reason why if you don't know your numbers, you're not going to have a very fun time in the sales because you don't even know if you're getting an ROI. But look at your numbers and know, okay, I'll make this much percentage, blah, blah, blah. A salesperson will cost me approximately this. So it's like, I don't know if we were just in Vegas, right? I don't know if either of you have ever played craps. But when you're playing craps, sometimes if you keep putting money out and then you can get your original bet back, there's this term in gambling called playing with the house's chips, where you get up, then you take your initial bet out and you're just playing with winnings. So I like that analogy for sales. Like, right now you have a baseline without a salesperson. So hey, if I can sell 5,000 MRR, 10,000 MRR, then I can just allocate all of those profits towards this next sales hire. I'm playing with the house's chips, right? So I'm going to make an initiative to hit that sales number. And I think it's better to focus rather on the timeline, but to focus on commit to the why, focus on the how, and disconnect from the when. That's a very good piece of advice I got from a coach. Focus on why are we doing this? And then commit to how you're going to get it. Commit to the why, focus on the how. How are you going to get that done? When it happens when it happens. But once I sell 10,000 MRR at my full seat price, I get a sales guy. And then reverse engineer that goal into some of the fundamentals. So CRM, you've absolutely got to have a CRM. You've got to have some sort of process. Call it a template or a script for each meeting. How many meetings are in your sales process? You've got to have a proposal. You got to have a presentation format. You're going to sit this business CEO through a 45-minute meeting. The least you can do is know what you're going to say or roughly what you want to achieve before you start the meeting, rather than sitting there and just winging it, talking about yourself. So you need to have a basic playbook. Let's call it a playbook of how many sales calls do we need? How does each sales call get structured? You need a very basic ideal customer profile at the very least. Who are we targeting and why? And why should they work with us? And then you need to get some basic stuff like, if this is an outbound rep, I'm assuming every rep should be at least partially outbound. You need to have a pond for them to fish in, Are you doing LinkedIn, cold call, cold email? Are you investing in marketing? That could be it too. Just invest in doing a direct mail campaign or email campaign or something to try to get the phone to ring a little bit. But give them something to fill their idle hours with that they can be, dialing for dollars or emailing or LinkedIn or doing business visits, something to fill those slack hours in the beginning to ramp them up. Once you have that, at least a light version of all of that, then the next thing you need to know is, what exactly is this person's job description? Like, what are they responsible for? So there's a bunch of types of salespeople, right? There's, we could call them openers, closers, and farmers. Or more commonly an SDR, BDR, sales development representative, business development representative. That's usually an opener. Then you have an account executive, is a typical term for somebody who takes meetings and closes it all the way to close. Then you have an account manager whose job is to upsell and cross-sell into existing clients. You should not have one person who is responsible for all three of those. You should at most two of those, but all three, that's like giving somebody three jobs. Then you figure out how you're going to compensate them. This is a longer answer than you thought you were going to get, probably. It wasn't, Andrew. But you've got to compensate Sales are performance-based employees. I actually think this is the most noble type of employment you can have. Like I only do well financially when I do well for you financially. Imagine a technician who came to you and said, "Hey, I kind of phoned it in last week. You can cut my paycheck in half." They would never do that. They're entitled to a fixed hourly rate. Salespeople are not entitled to their on-target earnings. They have to hit their target. I think it's a very noble profession that they want to build your business for you and they want to be compensated in kind because they made a lot of value for you. But then you've got to have a comp plan. Like this, there's tons of assets. I've made tons of posts on Tech Tribe about this very topic. I have a sales comp plan calculator that we built for Feel-Good. I could spend the next hour just on that, so I don't think I have time to get into it. But give them an honorable base that's almost enough money, and then give them an opportunity to earn really well, and never put a cap ever on commissions. They should be able to earn more than you if they do really well. Then, once you have a basic understanding of that, your salesperson is a lot more likely to succeed.
Yeah, you could take a drink now. That was where.
So you mentioned all the different types of sales roles. So when an MSP is just starting out, sort of hiring someone, do you sort of see them doing more of like hiring like the BDR type role and then them still sort of closing the sale themselves? Is that the typical model that you see happening?
Yeah, that's typically because the opening is the hardest part. Really, closing is actually way easier than opening, I think, especially in managed services. So they'll outsource that first, or they'll hire somebody for that first, and then typically they'll say, okay, once I get this much MRR, I can get an opener. Once I've paid off that opener, then I can invest in a closer, and then slowly weed yourself out of the sales role, just like you did on the technical role. Just like they'll typically hire a tier 1 tech first because they don't want to do that, and it's time consuming and et cetera, right? Labor intensive, and then they'll probably slowly hire up. They'll outsource up the technical ladder as they go. I would presume is probably normal. So yeah, that's very common.
So let's talk a little bit about the numbers. I think that that is something that people tend to either forget or overlook or have no clue, and you kind of have touched on that. So what type of typical numbers would you expect somebody to have before they can even think about hiring a salesperson?
Oh, like in terms of how much
MRR,
they need to be in revenue?
Like what would their yearly revenue be before I can even contemplate trying to compensate somebody else to do the sales?
That's a great question. But the truth is that it really depends on two things. It depends on what your lead flow is like, and it also depends on what your goals are. So if you are building long term and you don't need to pull a ton of cash out of this business, then I think you should hire earlier, $500,000. If you can swing it, But it also depends on your profitability. Like sometimes a lot of MSPs, unfortunately, we've seen they don't really charge enough. Oftentimes with no sales training, they're undercharging, and so they're doing $1 million, but they're barely clearing 10%. That's a tougher situation to be in. But if you're profitable, then as early as you can. I've seen at like $500,000 is a great time to bring in salespeople. But then also like, are you getting a lot of referrals? Are you doing a lot of networking? Do you have a lot of word of mouth happening? Have you invested in marketing that's starting to pay off? If you're getting at bats, if you're getting opportunities every month, then you should definitely hire a salesperson as early as you can, because they're going to be more consistent if that's their full-time job. But I see it very, very typically at the $1 million, $1.2 million range, the owner is like, they're starting to hit that critical mass where they're like, I really need to get out of this role. And they'll start really intentionally, earnestly working their way out, usually around $1 million. But I have a $4 million MSP I just met with. Oh, and they say, we have no idea how we got here. This kind of happened to us for doing a good job for 20 years. And I've just closed them all, and I don't have a sales process. So it really runs the gambit, but it depends on what you want to achieve. It depends on how your marketing is working, how many opportunities you're expecting from that person, and what kind of caliber of person you want, like how much money that person is going to be able to earn based off of the support you can provide for them. That's also going to help kind of narrow that down.
So I'd say the vast majority of our tech tribers are probably that sub $1 million in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of that might be thinking about trying to hire a salesperson with less than $500,000 in revenue, what would your advice, other than the stuff that you already mentioned as the soup starter, the power windows, power door locks, the standard stuff, getting the CRM, getting the process, having marketing going? Like, what would your advice be to them if somebody's trying to do that before they've reached that plateau of sales?
Yeah. Honestly, the fastest road to successful sales is a really clear, ideal customer profile. I will die on that hill. Really sink your teeth into it. And I mean, I talked about this even at ScaleCon. Like, an ICP is not just, hey, we service 10 to 150 users in Michigan. That is not an ICP. Those are two demographic traits. Demographics, from my perspective, is only a third of your ICP. So you have done 5% of an ICP. So I typically would never have even given this all away for free, but I gave it all out at ScaleCon. So now this is just unpay gated, I think, for me. But demographics, number one. I mean this. I mean, if you're listening to this, hey, I'm doing $250,000. I want the fastest road to a successful salesperson. Write this down. Demographics first. These are the definable, searchable parameters we can put in Sales Navigator, Zoom Info, Data Axle that I can use as a starting parameter, right? Geography, industry, time in business, revenue, employee count, stuff like that. Then you're going to build your psychographics. Psychographics you can't search with, but that will affect your copywriting, that will increase your likelihood of converting by a long shot. And this is how you take generic copy that came even from something syndicated like Tech Tribe stuff, which is all great stuff, but it's sort of inherently common denominator, right? That's sort of what it's made for, to be helpful starting point for a lot of MSPs. So there's nobody stopping you from taking that and then putting a filter of your ICP on top of that messaging, right? That's probably what you guys are trying to get them to do, honestly, is like make it your own, put your spin on it, make it stand out. So psychographics, like the starting way to think about this is like, what are they afraid of? What are their goals? What are their pains, right? And then that's a great place to start. What are they trying to achieve that they can't achieve? How can I help them do that? And then finally is what we call the use case. This is the third prong of the ICP. It's like, or also known as the horizontal niche. At what point, let's say I'm targeting CPAs, at what point in the CPA's journey should they work with me? Is it when they're trying to go multi-site? Is it when they want to start buying other MSPs? Is it other CPAs? Or you see what I mean? What circumstances are they undergoing that makes them a prime candidate to get the most value out of a signed contract with me? Then what will I do for that person? How will I deploy my results mechanism in order to give them results? And then third, what does their business look like after they've worked with me? And when you can answer all these questions, you will stand out. If all you do is what I just said, you will beat 50% of the MSPs, even in the tech tribe, who will never do that. You'll stand out. You will be more attractive. Your marketing will always yield higher results. And then your salesperson has arrows in their quiver to go out on the sales calls and say things that will actually convert and get people's attention. Because you're not just saying, we'll focus on the tech so you can focus on running the business. We're bigger, faster, Microsoft 365. We care about our customers, no tech jargon. That is all quite literally meaningless now because that's what every MSP says. So you've got to have something more compelling that's through the empathetic eyes of what your customer is going to care about. But I'm telling you, if you build that document for yourself, every marketing and sales effort you do from now on will be so much more successful. It is the shortest path to a profitable sales engine.
I'm sure Andrea loves you for saying that too. So
I do. I remember hearing that last week and I was like, yes, he gets it.
yeah. So
But yeah, I remember doing those types of campaigns where we would target like whatever your niche is that literally just moved offices. So if you had like a phone system, you did a phone system campaign for the dentist that just moved in, things like that. Like when do they need you the most?
Yeah.
When they just moved offices, right? So you target that and you show a case study or whatever use case of where you've helped someone just like them successfully move their phone systems from office to office. And like you said, you're a leg up from somebody else who isn't going to do that. So 100%.
So I want to get that little snippet on there. So I know Andrea, from a marketing perspective, would touch on that it is very hard, if not impossible, to be successful at marketing without having to know who your customer is. So have you seen anybody be successful on the sales side without having that in place? Without having who your ideal customer is, this demographic, psychographic profile,
Right.
buyer persona, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah, the people who have success in sales without a clear ICP, that success happened to them. They didn't create it. And unfortunately, sometimes they'll conflate the two. Like word of mouth referrals, getting a lot of word of mouth referrals is a sign that you're doing things well on the operations side. It is not a sign that you are a good salesperson because you're closing word of mouth referrals. I have news for you. Everybody closes 75% of their word of mouth referrals. That does not mean you know how to sell. It means you know how to order take for people who have done all the selling for you on their own behalf. They walked in and said, I need somebody and I already trust you. What's your price? That's pretty good. Let's do it.
Yep.
You're not a salesperson. Salesperson is when you call a stranger and they go, what? Huh? Who is this? What do you want? Okay. All right. You got 30 seconds. Can you get that person to pay you $200 a seat? That's what sales is, right? So to answer your question, long-term, no. If you don't have an ICP, you will not have consistent results. You'll have sporadic results. You'll have random results. And the law of large numbers says that over time, you will go up and to the right, but it happened to you simply because you didn't die as a business. You just stayed around long enough and did a good job. In some ways, that it's kind of enough, but it comes back to like what your goals are. If you're trying to achieve a specific exit or you're trying to achieve a specific result, random input will get random output. Consistent positive income input will get consistent positive output, period. So an ICP is going to be massively successful for your marketing and your sales.
Perfect. So New Frontier Technologies actually just popped a question in the chat. So, which kind of goes along exactly what you were thinking. So they said, we're a lean, nimble, and want to stay that way. How can we, the co-owners, implement some of these suggestions without having to hire to be full-time salespeople?
Yeah, great. If it's okay, I mean, I know we're on a little bit of a delay. I am going to ask a follow-up question, but then I can get into it. But when you say lean and nimble, if you could elaborate just a little bit, I'm assuming you want consistent new customers a year. If you have a number, like how many customers a year do you want? And do you want to like eventually become an absentee owner or something? Or if you could help me a little bit, just paint a clear picture of where you're trying to get to, then I could add a lot more nuance to my answer. But I'll say that, nobody is trying to force you to be a full-time salesperson. But until you have one, you are the salesperson. You are going to have to do all the selling. But if you want to be able to still do it sort of fractionally, then you just need consistent opportunities, right? So in many ways, I would say invest in marketing, but I even struggle to say that because sometimes we say that just posting Tech Tribe content every day on LinkedIn is marketing. That's not marketing. That's one act of visibility, maybe for people who already follow you. But you have to have a holistic marketing strategy if you want to have a really hands-off, super easy, relaxed lifestyle sales strategy. You know what I mean? You've got to go really hard on getting 4 meaningful conversations with prospects a month. That should be your job. Once a week, you have an awesome conversation with somebody who's going to buy in the next 90 days. Or if you just want 6 customers a year, then cut that in half. You need 2 great conversations a month. But somebody's got to be building anything requires time, money, or both. So building sales consistency is going to require your time or your money. So I would say, which one of those do you want to invest? It sounds like you don't want to invest time, so you have to invest money. And there's no version of this where you spend no time, no money, and get free customers. That's magical thinking.
So let's talk a little bit about, go back to, you touched on it with the numbers. Like, I totally agree with you. Referrals, word of mouth, like, that's easy. That's the low hanging fruit. If you're not closing 75% of that or better, then you've got a different issue. But let's talk about, like, what would the typical sales numbers be for a salesperson? Like, what would be the KPIs? Talk about, number of calls. Actually, New Frontier did post a little bit more. Said we like 6 new clients a year. Our goal is to first be less involved, and years from now sell.
Got it.
6 clients a year. What would the math look like on 6 clients a year? Just roughly.
Yeah, so let's reverse engineer it. Let's say that you can do I'm going to call it a blended closing rate of 25%. It's pretty good industry standard wise. Not very respectable. Blended, what I mean by blended is inbound and outbound combined, you're closing about 25%. I'd say that's pretty close to industry standard. Your blended might end up higher but it depends on like which lever of like how many outbound versus how many inbound you need. Because you're probably closing 12%, 10% of outbound, 75% of inbound, If you have a blended close average of 25%, then what we need is 6 times 4 presentations. We need 24 presentations a year or 2 presentations a month. If you want to have 2 good presentations a month, I would say that you've got to have 3 viable opportunities, very viable opportunities. And in fact, I would say we add a 4th one on there that you disqualify. I'm guessing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Frontier, but I'm guessing the reason that you're lean and nimble is you have good customers. You don't want squeaky wheels, right? So you don't want to be bringing on people just because they'll work with you, but then they end up being a big pain on the back end. So let's say you have 4 good opportunities. One of them you go, no, that's not what I'm looking for. One of them opts out or doesn't make it to the presentation stage because of price or whatever. Then you present to 2 people a month. That means every 2 months, you're going to get 1 new customer because you got 4 presentations out. So then we can reverse that. That's just let's call that the bottom and mid funnel down. We need to get to 4, let's call those consultations a month. I'm doing this all in my head, making sure my math is right. So 1 consultation per week. Everybody's going to give you different numbers, different vendors. I just interviewed somebody on my podcast who gave me numbers, and I'm like, honestly, I think they're so fantastically lying that I think I'm going to cut the whole thing out of my interview. The numbers they gave me, I thought were so audacious. I'll tell you that in 2019, 2020, we had between 333 and 500 outbound dials per on-site consultation. So 100 for my lowest tier reps, 100 true cold calls a day is 500 in a week, is 1 on-site consult. Cold calling has actually gotten a lot harder, honestly, since 2019. So you need slightly warmer conversations. Let's assume that you've warmed them, you've done some marketing, I don't know, you've got a newsletter, you're doing some of those activities of some kind. 75 to 100 outbound dials a day can get you much closer. You could easily do this in less, but I would say you need a lot of touches, right? So I would recommend, since you don't want to do cold calling, I would leverage things like LinkedIn, direct messages. I would leverage things like emails from Growably. Can't Growably also do like text messages and all sorts of stuff?
Yep.
Don't you guys also give them direct mail, like ready to print direct mail stuff?
Yeah.
Right.
Andrew and the team at MSP Camp's rocking it.
So,
Yeah.
one of the terms I just heard from somebody who runs an agency is they're saying that they're finding 15 touches before the first meeting. But a touch could be a meaningful touch, a call, voicemail, well-written email, not a mass spam email, a direct message, a direct mail, something like that. So if you need 4 conversations in a month, then you need, 15 meaningful touches into that person before they'll get there. You know what I mean? So you can kind of reverse that all the way out. And I would say you need really consistent marketing. You need to be sending hundreds of DMs a week into a 3 to 4 touch DM campaign. You need to have hundreds of emails and or a newsletter or something. You need to scale some direct mail as well. But if you can be doing those things, and almost all of that can be fully automated or nearly fully automated once, interstitially automated. So you invest a bunch of time into making it great, then you automate it, let it run. Then you invest more time, make it great, automate it, let it run. I'm doing my best without a whiteboard or anything in front of me to try to be as specific as I can. But
or a spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets.
Yeah, I'm a big spreadsheet fan, and that's what we use, like a success tracker or an activity tracker in our program, where we put in all these metrics. So we review your pipeline data, we look at your positive conversion rate, positive reply rates, presentation, or just consult to presentation, presentation close rate, number of sales goals you're trying to achieve. Then the calculator will spit it all the way back out to say you need to send 833 of these messages, and you will hit that goal. Yeah. So that's kind of what I've tried to do today. You need just some consistency, some scale, stuff like that. And then there's all sorts of things that you can be doing along the way. But the real answer from there is you need to go out, do some things that work for you, and measure them. The best lead gen strategy is the one you'll actually do. So if it means going to chamber events and provisor events, do that. If it's cold calling that you'll actually do that. But if you're never going to pick up the phone, then don't even pretend and lie to us and tell us that you are, because you're not going to. So that's not the right strategy for you. But you can't do nothing. You can't just magically hope that people will call you because you have a website. That doesn't work.
Yep.
Preach it.
That's such a long answer. I hope this is helpful. I'm sort of like blindly firing advice. I hope it's translating.
Yeah, I think, Andrea, kind of going back to the days when you and I were working together a decade ago, like that was kind of what I saw in my MSP. Like I need to have 2,000 to 3,000 contacts with a list with 2,000 to 3,000 contacts on it in order to generate one appointment a week. And like that's kind of the overall math, like super simplifying it. But so that tells me, okay, where am I going to get a list of 3,000 people?
Right.
That's what I need to work on. So that's, just like you said. And then for me, LinkedIn was it. Like that was the lever that I pulled to consistently get people on a list. And what I found was like LinkedIn in particular, it became a lot less. It actually was 500 to 600 of really engaged contacts on LinkedIn to generate, a 1 meeting a week, or to put 30 people in a room for a lunch and learn. So, so once you kind of wrap your brain around the math, then you're like, okay, it's not as easy for me to do it. How would I expect somebody else to do it with no systems, no marketing, no playbook? So I mean, I think that's a lot of the stuff that we tend to not think about. So New Frontier said, yes, a bit daunting, yet concretely actionable. So
good. I mean, furthermore, based on what you just said, Andrew, think about this. This is what I'm talking about when if you've just abdicated the sales function to a new hire, oftentimes they'll come up with these fantastical sales targets. Give me 50,000 MRR when your average client is 1,200 MRR.
Right.
It's not happening. You're not going to hit that number. Or if you do, you got to reverse engineer and go, okay, we have to make 300 calls a day. That doesn't work. That's impossible. So you know what I mean? Your goal also has to be tethered to what is a reasonable output from the action. And what is your average deal size? And you can't just decide you want $3,000 MRR deals when your average deal is 1,000. Yep. Well, why do you think your salesperson is suddenly going to be able to triple the average size of business that's engaging with your brand? That's not how that works. You've got to build a bridge to those big changes. But what I'm hoping that people are encouraged Like even hearing that daunting but actionable, you realize that's best case scenario.
Yep.
Daunting but actionable is a dream versus the guy sitting in his office in the dark with his head in his hands going, I've got no clue what the F I'm supposed to do right now. And I have a 90-minute block on my calendar at 5 to 7:30 in the morning that says, do marketing. And I'm sitting here pouring through these things from Nigel and Andrea and from Tahir going like, I don't know, I'll make a Facebook page. I'll try anything, try something. But you know, that misery, I know viscerally of like, I've got no freaking clue how to sell managed services. I had zero IT experience when I started in my MSP. Zero. I knew nothing. You don't have to know managed services to sell managed services. But when I started, I was like, we're going to do ECF, engage, consult, fulfill. The same thing I talked about I had a tier 2 engineer who he was 29, tragically lost 90% of his vision to Lyme disease, could no longer be a tier 2 engineer, and was like, can I please be useful? So he was an intern for me, $500 a month internship, making 100 dials a day. And I'm sure if he's listening to this, Jacob, I love you. His last name was Brainerd, and he talked and sounded like his last name was Brainerd. You know, he had no sales experience, zero sales experience. And we're cold calling ice cold leads. And I've never worked in IT. He's never worked in sales. I'm telling you, on his 4th day on the phone, he booked a consultation. It wasn't good. We ran a cable and sold a router or something to like a car dealership. It was something like but it was a success. We took it. Hey, we made $140 somewhere. But that was our first deal. I sold a VoIP deal in our 2nd week. I called the Chamber of Commerce and I was like, hey, can I give you a phone system? So that, because I wanted new businesses to call the chamber and go, who do I use for my phone provider, and give them my name. So it's like, hey, maybe they'd be an influential partner for me. So I sold a phone system, like a 5-seat VoIP deal, and I matched their Vonage price, and that's what I did on my 2nd week. And we just did it exactly like that. We just dug trenches by hand and dug our own irrigation the slow, hard way. And I'm a big fan of that. Just linear, consistent, hard growth. Once you realize that 80% of your competitors are too lazy or too timid to do it, you'll realize all you have to do is the really hard thing and you'll win. And that's it for sales. Just face your fear, do the really hard thing, take the action, and you don't have to do it forever. You just have to do it until you hit that bright line. Then you hire somebody and you say, keep doing exactly what I just did. Push this button 400 times and you'll get a customer. And you're off to the races.
So I think that might even be a follow-up that we do around sales. So like if I had to debrief everything that you said today around sales, and as it relates to our topic today was why our last salesperson, was a failure or didn't work out. I think to me, it has less to do with the actual action of selling than it does a lack of understanding numbers, understanding data.
Process.
Yeah.
So is that a fair assessment? If you don't have process, you don't understand what your numbers look like. You don't have command on that.
Right. It doesn't matter how slick you are in person. If you talk to one person a week, you will not hit sales 6 customers a year. It does not matter how good you are. It's impossible. Yep. You have to know your numbers. It's just like, you have to know your process just like anything else. And then you incentivize them to hit their activity. And like going back to what we talked about before, there should be no mystery as to whether or not anybody on your team is doing their job or not doing their job, right? You're either performing or you're underperforming or you're overperforming. And that should be objective. With techs, you know it. If we get over 30 open tickets, you guys failed. You know what I mean? Or fill in the blank. Your salesperson, it should not be all lag measures. It should not be all future things, and we have to wait till after the fact to find out if they were failing. Every Monday, I got a report that said how long everybody was on the phone and how many dials they made. And if it was outside of threshold, I got an alert and I said, Why did you only make 88 calls a day on average last week? And then we knew what, you know what I mean? So measuring and then defining success, because if they do, if you build it, they will come. If they take the action, they'll get the results. And then everybody knows this salesperson is doing their job or not doing their job, not how you feel when looking at them or how your anxiety is mapping onto your sales numbers today or whatever.
Yeah. Perfect. So I know we're coming up at the top of the hour. We want to be respectful of your time. Those of you watching, I'm looking, I see 12 people still online. So if any last minute questions for Brian, please drop those in the comments. But anything that else that we didn't ask Brian today, Andrea? I was looking
No,
down
I think
through
I
our
would,
list. So
no, just reiterate what you just said about, it's really less about the actual sales and everything you prepare before and after, as far as, getting everything, getting everyone equipped,
yeah,
around the selling.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for speaking at ScaleCon last week. We know you've done a lot to give to the tribe already, and we definitely appreciate that. So thank you so much for being on today's show for us today.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I know it got a little got a little accountable in here, which doesn't always feel good. And thank you to Frontier for playing, being a good sport about the questions. But I'm happy to be as helpful as I can to the channel. You guys, you know, I love the tribe, and thanks again for having me. Have me back anytime.
Perfect.
Love to be back.
All right, my friend.
Absolutely. Great information. Thank you.
Take care. We'll see you inside the tribe. Good to meet you virtually. We'll have to meet in real life sometime. Next time I come out to California. So
Yeah, see you then.
all right, my friend. Take care. That was a good one. I like the ones, like we should have had a whiteboard set up. Like that would have been good too, to whiteboard that out, like the math.
Oh yeah.
Because I think, I always tried to throw things at the wall, see what stuck, and never got anywhere. And I think that was the key when you and I worked together a decade ago, when I actually understood, okay, here's my average all-in seat price, and work backwards. This is how many, my close rate. Once I actually did the math, then it became achievable, because you knew, okay, like I said, if it was 2,000 to 3,000 people I had to put on a list, now that's how that's where I put my focus. How do I get 2,000 to 3,000 people to put on a list, and then work backwards? So yeah,
Right. Right. And that's what I'm seeing a lot right now, is a lot of people come to me, why is my marketing not working? Well, you're only sending to 20, 25 people. Like, you need more people on your list. It's a numbers game. It's always a numbers game,
exactly.
So yeah, it's a very common thing.
Yes, quite a few people appreciate that. So yeah, New Frontier said thanks, Brian, Andrea, and Andrew. Advanced IT. So we'll have to post this one to. Do you know if Brian has any standalone sales training sessions? I forgot to
I'm
ask
absolutely
him that. So
probably does.
yeah,
I can't imagine that he wouldn't.
So we'll pop that in the tribe. So those of you watching this on the replay, maybe we'll add that into the tribal forum post. Send that out to Brian. So we forgot to ask him, how do we get in touch with Brian? Actually, he's still on here. So let's bring Brian right back. We forgot to ask him, how do people work with you, Brian? he stayed on. He didn't. So he didn't exit. He
always keep your ear to the door and see what they say about you after you leave. Life lesson. No.
Perfect.
You know what? I do have our workshop next week is nearly sold out. I think I have 2 seats left. But feelgoodmsp.com/workshop. Every month we have a 3-day workshop. It's 90 minutes a day. It's on Zoom. It's $47, and it's basically how to build a scalable sales system for managed services. And I only let in 10 MSPs per month. So it's a live Zoom call where I can actually give direct feedback rather than a big webinar format. So that would be a way if you wanted to get
perfect. I'm going to throw that back up on the screen. I'm also going to put that in the YouTube chat for those of you who happen to be watching this on the replay. So that's feelgoodmsp.com/workshop.
Yeah, I think October might have a seat left. By the time you're watching this replay, it'll probably be sold out. But I have one in November and December coming up as well.
Awesome. All right. This is going to wrap us this time. We'll go out,
Yep.
play our outro music, and Brian, you have a good weekend. Andrea, you do as well. So
Alrighty.
Andrea's got
Thanks, guys.
her 2 boys coming in next week. So yeah, enjoy that time with your family.
Thank you.
All right, guys. We'll see you inside the Tribal Forum. Thanks. Well, we'll see you. Actually, the
Thank you, Noah.
24th is our next growth clinic. So
Yep.
tune in at 11 a.m. We're
Cool.
going to continue what we started last night. So
Great.
awesome.
We'll
All
see
right.
you
See ya.
guys.